There's another group of stitches on your stitch panel. In this group here where it says ABC and flower, these are your programmable stitches. This is where your lettering is and many of your decorative stitches. And these can be programmed together to make a stitch sequence that you want. Just as in the first group of stitches, we do have mirror imaging as a possibility, but we also have elongation, but this time it's a little different. You'll see that this goes up to ×5. And if you look here at your legend, you'll see that you can take a stitch such as a scallop stitch and elongate 5 different ways, like on my sample here. So your basic scallop stitch, when you choose it here, this is how it looks when you just select it and sew. But there's a difference between the programmable stitches and the first group of stitches that we worked with when it comes to elongation. Where in the first group of stitches we could go to ×2, here we can go to ×5. But the difference between stitch length and elongation is that if you use stitch length, you'll get the same number of stitches stretched out over a larger area. But when I choose elongation, more stitches are added, filling in the area that normally would be left if I just had used stitch length. Let's try stitch elongation with one of our stitches. So I'm going to select the stitch from the second group. I'm going to come down here to this ABC flower button, press it, and I'm just going to use that popular scallop stitch, which is the first one in my group. So I'm going to touch it to select, and now I'll press E, which is edit, which is going to give me some options. This is where I see my elongation along with mirror imaging and twin needle, but I'm going to press this and come over here to where elongation is. And I see it's on ×1 already, so let's sew that stitch as is. It's recommending presser foot B, which I've already put on the machine. The satin stitch foot is great for these denser stitches because there's a groove on the underside that lets the dense stitches pass freely underneath. Now let's go back up to E for edit, press our icon for elongation, and underneath this icon, let's go to ×3. And let's see what that looks like. So here's ×1, ×3. We'll come back up here to the screen, touch E for edit, back to our elongation selection to ×5. And one more row, and let's see what that one looks like. And there we go. If you'd like to find out more about how to use mirror imaging or stitch elongation for your programmable stitches, just refer to your online instruction manual. Another thing you can do with this group of stitches, because they're programmable stitches, is mix them together in different combinations to make original stitch sequences. There's stitches, there's letters, there's 5 different fonts, and you can mix them together to make any kind of stitch sequence you want. So let's see how to do that. We had just finished sewing the scallop stitch, and we don't need the scallop stitch anymore, so we want to erase that from the screen. So to do that, we're going to press this E, which means edit. And here, this icon is an eraser. So we'll press the button underneath that to delete the scallop stitch from the screen. I want to sew this stitch combination that looks like the word Anna with a flower on each end. So let's program that into the machine. I'm going to start by scrolling through my decorative stitches until I see the flower. Here it is, number 17. I'm going to press that, and I can see the flower is in the window, and it's still recommending that I leave my satin stitch foot or presser foot B on the machine. Now I'm going to select my letters. So I'll come to my ABC flower button on the front of the machine, press it, and each time I press it, I'm going to select a different font or decorative stitches, but we want the fonts, and I'm going to use this first font group, and I want the letter A, so I'm going to press the button under A to select it for the first letter in the word Anna, and then to get to the N, I'm going to scroll, and here it is. So I press it again, and then I'm going to scroll back to come back to the letter A, press it, and then use my ABC flower button or my ABC decorative stitch button and press it again until I see the grouping of decorative stitches in the window, and then scroll once again until I see that flower and select it. So there's my stitch sequence that I want to sew, and if I was to sew right now, it would repeat that continuously, but I want to sew it one time and have the machine stop automatically. So I'm going to continue scrolling until I see the stop and actually program the stop in there. So here's our stitch sequence, and naturally the machine connects in between letters as it sews. You would simply take a small scissor and just clip those connecting threads. There may be times when you're programming a stitch sequence where you realize that maybe you entered a stitch or a letter that you didn't really want, or you want to change it. That's really easy to do with your edit function. So in this case, where I had the flower and the name and a flower, maybe I want to change this flower to a heart instead of a flower. So you'll go to Edit, and then use your cursor buttons here to scroll over to where the one you want to change is highlighted. Use your eraser to delete it. Then come back over here to your stitch selecting button and scroll through until you get to the decorative stitches, and then scroll through the decorative stitches until you see the heart. Now you've made your change and you're ready to sew your new entry.